If there's one thing that the absolute worst elements of our society depend on, maybe more than anything else, it's that the majority of sane people have a lot going on in their lives. They have jobs, families, hobbies. They can't keep track of every big scandal they hear about on television and follow it for years to figure out how it turned out. They don't have the time to do that, even if they wanted to. And that's a boon in particular to the modern media, because they know that they can invent whatever lies they want in order to whip millions of people into a frenzy. By the time the truth comes out, most people will have moved on with their lives. They'll have already voted in whatever election was coming up. They certainly won't demand mass firings of all the editors and reporters who lied to them. Won't even remember their names. And if you doubt that, try to recall, just as an example, who exactly told you that Michael Brown was a good kid who had his hands up yelling, "Don't shoot," when a white supremacist police officer in Ferguson, Missouri shot him for no reason. Can you name any news anchor or journalist specifically who said that? Of course you can. I mean, they all did, but what's one particular one? It's impossible to single someone out because the entirety of the corporate media was telling the same lie in unison for 6 months. And then after all that time, and after a wave of deadly riots, the Obama DOJ was forced to admit that actually this good kid was not executed in the middle of the street for no reason. And oh yeah, he didn't have his hands up in surrender either. In reality, he had charged at the police officer, assaulting him and trying to take his gun. And he did that after he roughed up a store owner and stole some cigars. Did any of that extra context matter, though? To this day, college kids still gather in the street yelling, "Hands up, don't shoot," in honor of Michael Brown. It's not just BLM enforcers and Antifa who say that. A lot of normal, everyday people have the same totally inaccurate view of what happened. What's unspoken here, what no one dares to say in the media, regardless of partisan affiliation, is who the actual victims of these charades are. Now, on the right, you'll occasionally hear people talk about, Michael Brown and his crimes and how he wasn't really a victim. But the name Darren Wilson is usually ignored in those conversations. He's the police officer who happens to be white, who spotted Michael Brown walking in the middle of the street nearly a decade ago. He's the cop Michael Brown started punching without any provocation. How's Darren Wilson doing these days? No one seems to know or care. His lawyer said that he had to go into hiding. He could never be a police officer again. There aren't many recent updates on Darren Wilson's life on the internet these days. He's just disappeared. His life was destroyed, and that was that. The term scapegoat comes from the ancient Hebrew practice of casting an actual literal goat out into the wilderness as a symbol of the sins of the people and casting out the sins. We are laying all the sins upon this animal, casting it out. It's an old religious practice that's still carried out today, except in our culture, we find random white people like Darren Wilson to be exiled or destroyed as atonement for white sins specifically. Now, oftentimes the scapegoat is vindicated by the facts later on, but it doesn't really matter because the specific facts were never important to the mob and the people demanding this person's head. It doesn't matter what they did or what they didn't do. It matters what they represent. Maybe you recall this story from a few years back. In the late afternoon, several years ago, I think this is back in 2018, two black men walked into a Starbucks in Philadelphia, and they asked to use the bathroom. But the staff told them that the bathroom is for customers only, and that's a pretty common policy, especially in Philadelphia, because you don't want junkies shooting up in your bathroom. I mean, that's why they have these, that's why they lock the bathrooms. That's why they say you have to be a customer to use the bathroom. But the two men didn't buy anything. They just sat down and refused to make a purchase. After that went on for a while, and one of the staff members came up to them, told them they had to make a purchase or leave. Again, it's a reasonable request because Starbucks is not a homeless shelter. Okay, it's not just a lounge, to go hang out in. But the men refused to take either option. So the Starbucks worker called the police. And eventually the police arrived and they did exactly what they're supposed to do. They removed the trespassers. Watch.
Don't get no fight with them. Don't get no fight with them. Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah, what did they get called for? Because there are two black guys sitting here meeting me? Yes. Well, what did they do? What did they do? Did someone tell me what they did?
They didn't do anything. I saw the entire thing.
They didn't. What did they do?
Nothing. And the woman said it's for paying customers only after they leave. They didn't do anything.
There's a guy in that clip who keeps asking, what did they do? Which, of course, helped the whole incident to go viral. And it went massively viral at the time. After all, if a random guy in the viral video doesn't understand something, then it must be outrageous. But it really wasn't that hard to understand. These two men walked onto private property. They refused to buy anything. And when they were asked to leave, they refused. It's called trespassing, otherwise known as a crime. In a world filled with uncertainties, it's crucial to be ready for whatever comes your way, whether it's a natural disaster, a sudden emergency, or unforeseen circumstances. Having a reliable food storage system can provide you with peace of mind and the assurance that you and your loved ones will be well taken care of. Right now, My Patriot Supply is knocking $200 off their popular 3-month emergency food kit to help you start growing your supply today. Go to preparewithwalsh.com and grab this special price before it ends. Your 3-month emergency food kit provides over 2,000 calories each day for optimal strength and energy in essential situations. You can enjoy a wide variety of My Patriot Supply food, from buttermilk pancakes and chicken Alfredo to rice pudding. Their meals have you covered for every part of your day. And the best part is each meal is actually delicious. So don't wait for disaster to strike before taking action. Invest in your safety and well-being by securing your food storage today. Go to preparewithwalsh.com and save $200 on each kit that your family will need in an emergency. Go to preparewithwalsh.com right now. That's preparewithwalsh.com. Congress once again allowed itself to be pushed into appeasing the administration and raising the debt ceiling for the 79th time, paving the way for continued reckless spending and further devaluation of the dollar. As our national debt continues to skyrocket, how are you protecting your savings? Times like these are a great reminder to diversify a portion of your savings into gold. And you can do that with the help of Birch Gold. They're who I buy my gold from, so do thousands of other concerned savers as well. Birch Gold will help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. You don't pay a penny out of pocket. It's that simple. When currencies fail, gold is a safe haven. How much more time does the dollar even have? Protect your savings with gold. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and thousands of happy customers. You can find out why by texting Walsh to 989898 to get your free info kit on gold. Again, text Walsh to 989898. But when there's a moral panic underway, laws don't apply anymore, apparently. And that all really depends on your skin color. So social media was full of posts proclaiming that this was proof that white supremacy is alive and well in the United States. One of the most viral tweets about this episode, which got more than 100,000 likes, read this way, quote, "America's a place where a black man has a greater chance of being arrested for going to Starbucks than a white man who commits treason in front of the entire world." Protesters began screaming about racism in the Starbucks store where this all went down as they were flooding into the store, and this went on for days.
A whole lot of racism, a whole lot of crime. A whole lot of racism, a whole lot of crime. Starbucks coffee is anti-black. Starbucks coffee is anti-black.
Now, instead of standing up to this insanity, as expected, Starbucks, as expected, they would not stand up to it. I mean, Starbucks CEO Kevin Johnson closed all of the company's stores in the US and Canada, like all the stores because of this, for racial bias training. He also declared that bathrooms in Starbucks henceforth would be open to anyone, paying customers or not. Junkies can sit on the toilet and shoot up all they want. Kevin Johnson later went on CNBC to brag about how well he handled the situation. And in the kiss of death, Jim Cramer praised him for it. Watch.
Talk about crisis. Talk about the way you handle it. Because I think when we look back in the textbooks, it's going to be the way you have to handle something that is antithetical to everything you believe in.
Well, first of all, Jim, you got to say that when I saw the video of the two gentlemen who were arrested in our store, it was heartbreaking. But I knew at that moment that, as the CEO of the company, I'm accountable and we've got to show up. I've got to show up. And so getting to Philadelphia, being on the ground and talking to everyone that I could talk to and learn from and understand why this happened, how this could happen, and then take action to ensure that it never happens again. Now, we're proud of the actions we've taken. We closed our stores for the afternoon on May 29th. We did the first round of training every month. We're continuing to drop new training modules to our stores. And it has made us a better company. It has allowed us to actually elevate the customer experience in our stores.
I have to say, from the point of view of seeing a lot of CEOs address an issue, you got in front of it.
Now, obviously, if Jim Cramer is praising something, it's going to collapse very quickly. And Starbucks' response to this whole episode, which Jim Cramer loved, did just that. About a month after this incident, Starbucks decided to fire an employee named Shannon Phillips. Who is Shannon Phillips? Well, she was a regional manager in charge of 13 Starbucks locations in and around Philadelphia. She was not the store manager in charge of the location where this incident happened. But Shannon Phillips was fired anyway. Why? Well, here's what Shannon Phillips alleged in her lawsuit against Starbucks. She says that the company, quote, took steps to punish white employees who had not been involved in the arrests, but who worked in and around the city of Philadelphia in an effort to convince the community that it had properly responded to the incident. So Starbucks just looked for a white person to fire, is what they did. Phillips said that Starbucks told her to punish a white employee for PR purposes, for just made-up reasons. And when Phillips refused, they fired her. They kept the black employee who ran the store at the center of this incident. Like, the actual store manager was black, and they kept him, but they canned the regional manager. Now, as you may have heard, Phillips just won a $25 million wrongful termination lawsuit against Starbucks. She proved that they discriminated against her because she's a white person who was offered as a sacrificial victim, just like Darren Wilson, and just like so many others. In her case, she was vindicated. She got some restitution, but that's rarely how these things play out. And by the way, just to put a bow on this whole farce, last year, Starbucks reversed its open-door bathroom policy. According to the Philadelphia Inquirer, quote, Starbucks is modifying its open bathroom policy that allows anyone to use the restroom at its stores. Employees now have the option to close bathrooms if there are safety concerns. In other words, actually, Starbucks still doesn't want junkies shooting up in their bathrooms. They allowed it for a few years in order to virtue signal, and then they realized that, no, this is actually terrible. This is why we don't want this. Maybe the manager who called the cops 5 years ago was right after all. Who would have thought? That case is notable because it's so rare. You almost never see vindication for the sacrificial lambs in any of these cases. Certainly you don't see restitution. You don't see legal vindication anyway. And you almost never see laws against racism applying to actual racists, indiscriminately in this way. Instead, you see what's happening to Daniel Penny, who's the Good Samaritan who restrained a violent lunatic on the New York subway. And we finally heard his full side of the story a few days ago, which we played on the show at the time. Now keep in mind, Daniel Penny is taking a major risk by speaking out. Most defense attorneys tell their clients, and I don't know if this happened with Daniel Penny, but I would assume it did, tell their clients to stay silent and plead the fifth. That's because even if you're innocent, it's easy to slip up and say something that a prosecutor can use in court to make the case that you're guilty. So it tells us a lot that Daniel Penny, like Kyle Rittenhouse, is disregarding those risks. He knows he knows what happened. He knows the truth. He was listening to music on his headphones, minding his own business when Jordan Neely, a vagrant with dozens of arrests, including one for punching a senior citizen, actually a couple of senior citizen assaults, began doing exactly what you would expect of a vagrant who punches senior citizens. He was threatening to kill passengers. He was saying that he wasn't afraid to go to jail. He wasn't afraid to die. Penny, a Marine, then restrained Neely with the help of another passenger, making sure he could breathe. And that's when Neely, who, according to his family, was taking mind-altering synthetic drugs to treat depression, died. It's clear now, as if it wasn't clear already, that Penny was not only in the right, but in fact acting heroically. And we also know that much of what was originally claimed about the case, especially that Penny choked Neely for 15 minutes, was a lie. The actual incident went on for just a few minutes, like 5 minutes. But in spite of all those facts, which aren't even in dispute, a grand jury just this week indicted Daniel Penny. He becomes yet another in a long line of scapegoats who happen to share the same skin color. At a certain point, you have to take a step back and recognize that the specifics of all these incidents, again, don't matter to the mob. No one cares that Michael Brown never said, hands up, don't shoot. No one cares that the two black men in the Starbucks were trespassing. No one cares that Jordan Neely was threatening to kill people. All that matters is that Darren Wilson, Shannon Phillips, and Daniel Penny have the wrong skin color. At least that's all that matters to the social media mob, to the media, to the biggest corporations in the country, to the justice system in so many cases. We see it again and again in too many incidents to mention. And they're not worried that Shannon Phillips won $25 million. They think her case is the exception that proves the rule, which is that there are no consequences for lying in the most base and unethical ways possible. What's hopeful, what suggests that they might be very mistaken, is that these sacrificial lambs aren't just going into hiding anymore. Darren Wilson had to disappear nearly a decade ago. That's how powerful the mob was. People like Daniel Penny, they're not hiding. He's going in front of cameras, telling everyone what really happened. Even in Alvin Bragg's New York, of all places, he's doing that. Right now, this is not the norm. But if Daniel Penny wins, as Shannon Phillips did, that could change in a hurry. Once the race hucksters and the outrage merchants know that their targets aren't going to simply back down and that people will remember what happened to them, then those people start to lose their power. And obviously that can't happen soon enough. But in the meantime, those race hucksters and outrage merchants are, of course, today canceled. Thanks for checking out this video. If you'd like to listen to my full podcast on the go, you can check out The Matt Walsh Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.